We need someone who can make this shot." The SWAT commander's voice cracked with desperation as he stared through binoculars at the impossible angle. 300 yards, moving target, civilian hostages in the line of fire. His best marksman was down, backup was 20 minutes out, and they had maybe 5 minutes before the situation turned deadly. One officer whispered frantically, "Wait, didn't that clumsy woman from the diner used to be military?" All eyes turned to the figure crouched behind a patrol car, coffee stains on her uniform, hands shaking as she fumbled with a radio. Looked up with steady eyes and said only 4 words, "Give me the rifle." Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Meet Elena Vasquez, 42 years old, former Army sniper who left active duty after a classified mission went sideways in 2018. She moved to Millbrook Falls, a sleepy mountain town of 3,000 people, and took a job as a part-time waitress at Murphy's Diner. The locals knew her as the woman who dropped more plates than she served, who spilled coffee on customers at least twice a week, and who couldn't seem to hold on to anything without it slipping through her fingers. The owner, Frank Murphy, kept her on mostly out of pity and because she showed up every single shift without fail. Rain or shine, Elena arrived at work each morning at 5:30, 30 minutes before opening, always through the back door. She'd tie her long black hair into a messy bun, put on the faded blue uniform that never quite fit right, and spend those quiet minutes before the breakfast rush staring out the window toward the mountains. The other waitresses, particularly Sarah Chun, who worked the day shift, would whisper among themselves about Elena's legendary clumsiness. There was the infamous incident with the wedding cake that somehow ended up on the floor instead of the anniversary couple's table. The time she managed to drop an entire tray of dishes while standing perfectly still, as if gravity had suddenly decided to work overtime around her. Frank Murphy would shake his head whenever insurance adjusters called about broken dishware. "Elena tries hard," he'd tell his wife Martha over dinner. "But that woman has butterfingers like you wouldn't believe. Last week, she dropped the same salt shaker 4 times during one conversation." Martha would nod sympathetically while secretly wondering why Frank didn't just let Elena go. What they didn't know was that Elena's apparent clumsiness was entirely deliberate, a carefully constructed facade designed to make her forgettable, unremarkable. Just another small-town waitress struggling to keep plates from falling. The breakfast regulars at Murphy's Diner had their theories about Elena. Old Pete Kowalski, who came in every morning for black coffee and wheat toast, was convinced she had some kind of neurological condition. "Poor girl," he'd mutter to his buddy Jim Rodriguez. "Probably something from the war. She's got that look, you know. Like she's seen things." Jim, a Vietnam veteran himself, wasn't so sure about the medical condition theory, but he agreed about the look in her eyes. There was something distant there. Something that suggested experiences beyond dropping coffee cups and fumbling with order pads. Dr. Patricia Williams, the town's only physician, occasionally observed Elena during her morning coffee runs before heading to the clinic. As a former Navy medic, she recognized certain tells in Elena's posture and movement patterns. The way Elena's eyes automatically swept every room she entered, cataloging exits and potential threats. How she instinctively positioned herself with her back to walls whenever possible. The slight hesitation before she deliberately let objects slip from her grasp, as if the clumsiness required conscious effort rather than being natural. Elena's small apartment above Rossetti's hardware store was spartanly furnished, containing little more than essential furniture and a few personal items. Her neighbors rarely heard anything from upstairs beyond the occasional creak of floorboards. Mrs. Rose Rossetti, who owned the hardware store below, mentioned to her customers that Elena was the quietest tenant she'd ever had. Never any parties, never any visitors, pays her rent 2 weeks early every month, Rose would say while ringing up purchases. "Sometimes I forget she's even up there." What Mrs. Rossetti and the other townspeople didn't know was that Elena spent her evenings maintaining skills that had nothing to do with carrying dinner plates. In her spare bedroom, she'd converted a closet into a cleaning station where she methodically maintained a precision air rifle she'd purchased for pest control. She told herself it was just for keeping raccoons away from the dumpster behind the diner, but the truth was more complex. The familiar ritual of cleaning, oiling, and calibrating the weapon kept her connected to a part of herself she'd tried to leave behind. Every few weeks, Elena would drive her rusted Toyota pickup 30 miles to an abandoned quarry outside town limits. She told anyone who asked that she was visiting her cousin in Riverside, but there was no cousin, and Riverside was just a truck stop with a gas station. At the quarry, she'd spend hours shooting at improvised targets, maintaining muscle memory and mental focus that most people lose without constant practice. Her natural talent hadn't diminished during her years of self-imposed exile from military life. If anything, the isolation and deliberate suppression of her abilities had sharpened her focus. The local police department consisted of Chief Robert Martinez, 2 full-time deputies, and Elena's secret connection to law enforcement that nobody suspected. 3 years earlier, during a routine traffic stop that turned violent, Elena had witnessed Deputy Mike Chen, Sarah's husband, get attacked by a suspect wielding a knife. Without hesitation, she'd thrown her car keys with precision that would have impressed an Olympic athlete, striking the attacker's wrist and causing him to drop the weapon long enough for Deputy Chen to regain control. When questioned about her remarkable accuracy, Elena had shrugged and claimed she'd played softball. In high school, Deputy Chen never forgot the incident, but he also never quite believed Elena's softball explanation. Something about the way she'd moved, the calculated precision of her throw, suggested training far beyond high school athletics. He'd mentioned it to his wife Sarah, who just rolled her eyes and pointed out that Elena couldn't even carry a coffee pot without incident. "Honey," Sarah had said, "if Elena's some kind of secret athlete, then I'm a NASA astronaut." The woman trips over her own shadow. The truth Elena carried was heavier than dropped dishes or spilled coffee. She'd been part of an elite Army sniper team that operated in classified theaters, taking shots that other marksmen deemed impossible. Her record included confirmed eliminations at distances exceeding 800 yards, often in adverse weather conditions that would challenge even the most sophisticated equipment. She'd saved countless American lives by neutralizing threats before they could materialize, working from concealed positions for hours at a time without moving a muscle. Elena's transition to civilian life hadn't been voluntary in the traditional sense. A mission in Eastern Europe had gone catastrophically wrong when intelligence proved faulty, resulting in civilian casualties that haunted her dreams. The official after-action report classified the incident as an unavoidable tragedy, clearing her of any wrongdoing, but Elena couldn't clear herself. She'd requested discharge, despite pressure from superiors who recognized her as one of the military's most valuable precision shooters. The morning routine at Murphy's diner followed the same pattern 7 days a week. Elena would fumble through coffee service, drop the occasional plate for effect, and listen to the gentle mockery from customers who saw her as harmless comic relief. Frank Murphy's patience with her supposed clumsiness came from genuine kindness, but also from the fact that despite her apparent coordination problems, Elena's section always had the cleanest tables, the most accurate orders, and somehow the happiest customers. What nobody realized was that every dropped plate, every spilled drink, every stumbled step was a conscious performance designed to hide capabilities that could surface again if the wrong people came looking for Elena Vasquez, former staff sergeant, designated marksman, and one of the most lethal precision shooters the U.S. Army had ever produced. Elena's most unsettling habit, according to the morning coffee crowd at Murphy's Diner, was how she never seemed startled by anything. When the ancient espresso machine backfired with a sound like a gunshot, other staff members would jump and curse, but Elena would simply continue wiping tables with the same methodical rhythm. When teenagers roared through town on motorcycles, with modified exhaust pipes, everyone else looked up annoyed from their breakfast conversations. But Elena would just refill coffee cups as if nothing had happened. Mrs. Dorothy Hendricks, who ran the town's small library and observed people with the careful attention of someone who'd spent 40 years watching human behavior, noticed that Elena possessed an almost supernatural awareness of her surroundings. "She always knows who's coming through the door before they open it," Dorothy mentioned to her book club. "Last Tuesday, I watched her start pouring coffee for Mayor Davidson a full minute before he walked in for his usual order. When I asked how she knew, she just said she heard his car door slam." The mayor himself, Thomas Davidson, had grown fond of Elena despite her reputation for clumsiness. There was something oddly comforting about her presence, though he couldn't articulate exactly what. During town council meetings held at the community center next to the diner, he'd noticed Elena always volunteered to work the evening shift when important discussions were scheduled. She'd bring coffee and sandwiches to the council members, moving through the room with surprising grace when she thought nobody was paying attention. Dr. Patricia Williams made a point of studying Elena more carefully after several intriguing observations. During a particularly busy Saturday morning rush, she'd watched Elena serve 6 tables simultaneously while maintaining perfect awareness of every customer's needs. The supposed Butterfingers never mixed up orders, never forgot special requests, and somehow always anticipated when someone needed a refill. "It's almost like she's operating on a different level of consciousness," Patricia confided to her husband over dinner. "Like she's processing information the rest of us miss entirely." Elena's relationship with technology puzzled everyone who witnessed it. She claimed to have trouble with the diner's modern point-of-sale system, frequently asking for help with basic functions that she should have mastered after 3 years of employment. However, when the system crashed during a power surge, Elena had quietly rebooted it and restored all the day's transactions while Frank Murphy was still trying to find the manual. When asked how she'd managed the complex recovery procedure, Elena shrugged and said she'd pressed some buttons and got lucky. The volunteer fire department's monthly training sessions took place behind the community center, visible from Murphy's diner's back windows. Elena always found excuses to work in the kitchen during these drills, watching through the service window as local volunteers practiced emergency response procedures. Fire Chief Gary Matthews noticed Elena's intense interest and once jokingly invited her to join. "We could use more volunteers," he'd said, not expecting her to decline so quickly and firmly. "I don't think I'm coordinated enough for that kind of work," Elena had replied, immediately dropping a stack of napkins to emphasize her point. What Chief Matthews didn't know was that Elena had watched every drill with the critical eye of someone evaluating tactical efficiency. She'd identified multiple problems with their breach and clear procedures, noticed gaps in their perimeter security, and mentally calculated improved positioning for their equipment. Her kitchen vantage point allowed her to observe without drawing attention, maintaining her cover while staying connected to operational thinking she couldn't quite abandon. Elena's sleeping patterns concerned her upstairs neighbor, Mrs. Rossetti, who mentioned to customers that she often heard footsteps at unusual hours. 2 or 3 in the morning, she's walking around up there, Rose would whisper to regular customers. "Sometimes I hear what sounds like furniture moving. Maybe she has insomnia." What Elena actually did during those late-night hours was practice movement drills in her small apartment, maintaining muscle memory for stalking and positioning techniques that required absolute silence. The town's teenagers found Elena simultaneously amusing and mysterious. Jenny Patterson, who worked part-time at the diner during summer breaks, was fascinated by Elena's contradictory nature. "She'd drop a whole tray of drinks," Jenny told her friends at school, "but then she'll catch a salt shaker that's rolling off a table without even looking at it. Like, her reflexes are insane, but only sometimes. Jenny's boyfriend, Marcus Thompson, worked at the gas station and reported similar observations about Elena's inconsistent coordination. Elena's reaction to unexpected visitors revealed another layer of her mysterious nature. When strangers entered the diner, particularly those who looked official or carried themselves with military bearing, Elena's demeanor would shift subtly. Her clumsiness would become more pronounced, as if she were emphasizing her harmless, incompetent persona. Deputy Chen noticed this pattern during his regular patrol stops, watching Elena literally stumble more frequently when unfamiliar law enforcement officers accompanied him for training or consultation. The monthly visits from state police investigators working cold cases prompted Elena's most dramatic displays of awkwardness. Detective Lisa Torres, who came through town regularly while investigating a series of unsolved cases, found Elena's nervousness around law enforcement both endearing and puzzling. "That poor woman gets so flustered when we're around," Torres mentioned to Chief Martinez. "Last month she spilled coffee on herself 3 times during one conversation. It's like she's afraid we're going to arrest her for something." Elena's knowledge of local geography exceeded what anyone expected from a relative newcomer to the area. When hikers asked for directions to remote trails, she could provide detailed route descriptions, including landmarks, elevation changes, and potential hazards. "I like to take long walks," she'd explain when questioned about her familiarity with terrain that most locals had never explored. What she didn't mention was that she'd systematically mapped every approach and escape route within a 50-mile radius of Millbrook Falls. The local hunting community respected Elena despite never seeing her participate in their activities. Joe Reynolds, who ran the sporting goods store, mentioned that Elena occasionally purchased ammunition for what she claimed was pest control around the diner. "She knows quality when she sees it," Joe told other customers. "Always buys the expensive stuff, never complains about price. Acts like she doesn't know much about guns, but she picks exactly the right caliber and grain weight for what she says she's doing." Elena's financial habits intrigued the bank staff at Millbrook Community Bank. Despite working part-time at minimum wage, she never seemed concerned about money. Her rent payments arrived early, she never applied for loans, and her modest spending pattern suggested someone living well within their means. Teller Amanda Foster noticed that Elena always paid in cash and never used checks or credit cards. "It's like she doesn't want to leave any paper trail," Amanda mentioned to her supervisor, not realizing how accurate her casual observation actually was. During the town's annual 4th of July celebration, Elena's behavior became noticeably more withdrawn. She'd volunteer for extra shifts at the diner, avoiding the fireworks display and parade that brought thousands of visitors to Millbrook Falls. When customers asked why she didn't join the festivities, Elena would cite her clumsiness as a liability in crowded spaces. "I'd probably knock over a kid or trip over a fire hydrant," she'd joke, but her eyes would carry a distant sadness that suggested deeper reasons for avoiding patriotic celebrations. The nickname Butterfingers started during Elena's 2nd month at Murphy's Diner, when she managed to drop 3 plates during the Sunday morning rush while serving the Kowalski family reunion. Old Pete's grandson, Danny, a smart-mouthed 12-year-old visiting from the city, had laughed loudly and announced to everyone in the restaurant, "This lady's got Butterfingers." The name stuck like glue, spreading through Millbrook Falls faster than gossip about the mayor's fishing trips. Frank Murphy tried to defend Elena whenever customers complained about her clumsiness, but even his patience wore thin during particularly expensive accidents. When Elena shattered the antique coffee pot that had belonged to his grandmother, Frank spent 20 minutes explaining to his wife Martha why they couldn't afford to keep replacing equipment. "I know she means well," Frank said while sweeping up porcelain shards, "but good intentions don't pay for new dishes. Maybe we should suggest she find work that doesn't involve handling fragile items." The morning coffee regulars developed elaborate strategies for protecting their belongings whenever Elena approached their tables. Businessman Harold Fletcher would instinctively move his laptop bag to the floor and cover his papers with his hands the moment Elena appeared with the coffee pot. "Nothing personal, Elena," he'd say with a patronizing smile. "But I've got important contracts here, and accidents happen." Elena would nod understandingly while internally calculating that Harold Fletcher's important contracts were actually just insurance forms and fishing supply catalogs. Sarah Chun, the diner's day shift manager, spent considerable energy making excuses for Elena's performance to frustrated customers. "She's really trying her best," Sarah would explain to visitors who complained about spilled drinks or dropped food. "Elena's got a good heart. She's just not naturally coordinated. Some people are born athletes, and some people are born, well, like Elena." Sarah's well-meaning defense actually made Elena's reputation worse, painting her as someone so fundamentally incompetent that she deserved pity rather than expectation. The town's teenagers found Elena's clumsiness endlessly entertaining, turning her mishaps into social media content and inside jokes. Madison Cooper, a high school senior who worked part-time at the ice cream parlor next door, would film Elena through the window whenever particularly spectacular accidents occurred. "You guys won't believe what Butterfingers did today," became Madison's regular opening line for TikTok, videos that garnered hundreds of views from kids in neighboring towns who'd heard about Millbrook Falls' most accident-prone waitress. Local business owners grew increasingly frustrated with Elena's reputation reflecting poorly on the town's hospitality industry. Rebecca Martinez, who owned the bed and breakfast across the street, worried that tourists would associate the entire town with incompetent service. "I understand Frank wants to help her," Rebecca complained to other Main Street merchants, "but when visitors see a waitress dropping food and spilling coffee, they assume that's the standard everywhere in town. It's bad for all our businesses." The volunteer community organizations initially welcomed Elena's offers to help with fundraising events and community projects, but quickly learned to assign her only the most basic tasks. When Elena volunteered for the annual church bake sale, Pastor William Roberts diplomatically suggested she handle monetary transactions rather than serve food to customers. "We appreciate your willingness to help," Pastor Roberts explained gently, "but maybe cashier duties would be a better fit for your skill set." Elena's attempts to integrate with other community activities met similar resistance disguised as kindness. The Millbrook Falls Women's Auxiliary politely declined her offer to help serve at their monthly luncheons after hearing about her reputation. President Alice Morrison explained their decision with exaggerated diplomacy. "We certainly admire your community spirit, dear, but our events require a certain level of precision. Perhaps you could help with setup or cleanup instead of direct service." Chief Martinez's wife, Carmen, felt genuinely sorry for Elena and occasionally invited her to social gatherings, but always with careful preparation. "I'll pick you up personally," Carmen would say, "and we'll sit somewhere away from anything breakable." These well-intentioned precautions made Elena feel more isolated rather than included, emphasizing her perceived incompetence even among people trying to be kind. The local book club, led by librarian Dorothy Hendricks, tried to include Elena in their social circle, but members grew nervous whenever refreshments were involved. During their monthly meetings at various members' homes, hostesses would serve drinks in plastic cups and use paper plates when Elena attended. "It's more casual this way," they'd explain unconvincingly, while Elena pretended not to notice the good china safely stored away from her supposedly dangerous hands. Elena's reputation for clumsiness extended beyond the diner into everyday interactions throughout town. Store clerks would hover nervously whenever she shopped for groceries, ready to catch falling items or clean up accidents. At Rossetti's hardware store, Mrs. Rose would physically take tools from Elena's hands to demonstrate proper usage, assuming she couldn't handle basic implements safely. "Let me show you how this works, honey," Rose would say condescendingly, explaining simple mechanisms to someone who had once assembled precision rifle scopes in complete darkness. The town's medical professionals developed theories about Elena's condition based on superficial observations and community gossip. Dr. Patricia Williams occasionally mentioned to colleagues that Elena might benefit from occupational therapy or neurological evaluation. There could be an underlying motor control issue. Dr. Williams speculated during informal discussions with visiting specialists. The poor woman seems to have genuine coordination problems that might respond to professional intervention. Local law enforcement viewed Elena as a harmless but potentially problematic resident who might inadvertently create public safety issues. Deputy Mike Chen warned his wife Sarah about Elena's clumsiness extending beyond the workplace. "I've seen her trip over perfectly flat sidewalks," Mike told Sarah during dinner conversations. "She's lucky she hasn't hurt herself seriously. Maybe we should check on her more often, make sure she's not creating hazards for other people." The volunteer fire department discussed Elena's potential liability during their monthly safety meetings. Captain Gary Matthews expressed concerns about Elena's presence during emergency situations. "If we ever have to respond to something at the diner," Gary told his team, "we need to account for a civilian who might panic and create additional obstacles. Someone that unsteady could easily get in our way or hurt herself trying to help." Elena's landlady, Mrs. Rose Rossetti, worried constantly about property damage from her clumsy tenant. Rose had quietly increased Elena's security deposit and conducted monthly inspections disguised as friendly visits. "Just checking to make sure everything's working properly," Rose would say while examining the apartment for signs of accidents or damage. She'd mentally cataloged every item that could potentially be broken by someone with Elena's reputation for mishaps. The gossip network that connected Millbrook Falls' various social circles consistently portrayed Elena as a tragic figure deserving sympathy but incapable of significant responsibility. Phone conversations between friends invariably included updates on Elena's latest accidents, discussed with the kind of concerned condescension reserved for people considered fundamentally helpless. "Bless her heart" became the standard concluding phrase whenever Elena's name came up in conversation. Even children in town learned to view Elena as an object of gentle mockery rather than respect. Parents would point her out as an example of how not to behave, using her clumsiness as a teaching tool. "Walk carefully, or you'll end up like the Butterfingers lady at the diner," mothers would warn their children, inadvertently reinforcing Elena's reputation as the town's cautionary tale about coordination and competence. The first crack in Elena's carefully constructed facade appeared during a busy Friday evening rush when a customer's toddler knocked over a full water glass that went flying toward an expensive laptop on the neighboring table. Without seeming to look, Elena's hand shot out with lightning precision, catching the glass mid-flight before a single drop could spill. The movement was so fluid and perfectly timed that several customers turned to stare. Elena immediately covered by pretending to stumble backward, bumping into a chair and making her catch appear accidental. "Lucky grab," she mumbled with embarrassment. But the businessman whose laptop she'd saved looked at her with newfound curiosity. During the town's spring cleaning day, when volunteers gathered to beautify Main Street, Elena found herself assigned to hanging decorative banners across storefront windows. While other volunteers struggled with measurements and uneven spacing, Elena's banners hung in perfect alignment, each exactly the same height and distance from the last. When Councilwoman Janet Phillips complimented the precise placement, Elena quickly moved one banner slightly crooked. "Oops, must have bumped it," she said, deliberately introducing the imperfection that people expected from her. The annual county fair brought traveling carnival games to Millbrook Falls, including a shooting gallery that challenged visitors to knock down metal targets with air rifles. Elena avoided the booth entirely until Jenny Patterson dragged her over during a slow afternoon, insisting it would be fun to watch the clumsy waitress attempt marksmanship. "Come on, Elena, just try one shot," Jenny pleaded, holding out tickets. Elena reluctantly accepted, then proceeded to miss every target dramatically, her shots going wide in directions that would have been impossible for someone with even basic firearms knowledge. The carnival operator reset the game sympathetically, assuming she'd never held a rifle before. What Jenny didn't notice was how Elena's stance automatically shifted into a modified weaver position before she deliberately corrected herself into an amateur's awkward grip. The carnival operator, a former Marine, caught the brief glimpse of proper form and frowned thoughtfully, but Elena's subsequent wild shots convinced him he'd imagined the momentary professionalism. "Some folks just aren't cut out for shooting," he told other customers as Elena walked away, shaking her head at her supposed ineptitude. Elena's knowledge of weather patterns exceeded what anyone expected from a small-town waitress, though she disguised her expertise as simple intuition. When storm systems approached Millbrook Falls, she could predict wind direction changes hours before they occurred, allowing her to secure outdoor furniture and adjust the diner's awning before other businesses even noticed threatening clouds. "I grew up in tornado country," she'd explain when customers commented on her accurate predictions, though her hometown records showed no unusual weather patterns that would explain such precise forecasting abilities. The subtle military precision appeared in Elena's movements whenever she thought nobody was watching carefully. Dr. Patricia Williams noticed that Elena's walking gait changed completely when she moved between tasks in the empty diner during early morning setup. The shuffling, uncertain steps disappeared, replaced by the silent, measured pace of someone trained to move without detection. When customers arrived, Elena would immediately resume her clumsy shuffle, as if switching between two entirely different people. Elena's reaction to sudden loud noises revealed training that contradicted her nervous, startled persona. When construction workers began road repairs outside the diner, their pneumatic jackhammers created explosive sounds that made everyone jump except Elena. Instead of startling, she would pause mid-motion, her eyes automatically scanning for threats before she remembered to flinch dramatically. Deputy Chen witnessed this pattern repeatedly, noting how Elena's initial response suggested someone accustomed to weapons fire rather than a civilian frightened by unexpected sounds. The diner's coffee supplies required monthly deliveries from a warehouse 30 miles away, and Elena always volunteered to help unload the truck despite her reputation for dropping everything. The delivery driver, a veteran named Tommy Rodriguez, noticed that Elena could estimate box weights with uncanny accuracy just by looking at them. "That one's about 47 pounds, she'd say casually, and Tommy's scale would confirm her guess within a pound or two. When he complimented her skill, Elena would claim she'd worked in a grocery store before, but her estimates were far more precise than typical retail. Experience would explain Elena's understanding of vehicle mechanics. Puzzled Joe Reynolds at the gas station when her pickup truck needed repairs. While describing the problem, Elena used technical terminology that suggested advanced knowledge of automotive systems, then quickly simplified her language when Joe looked surprised. "I mean, it makes weird noises when I turn," she'd correct herself, abandoning the detailed explanation of differential gear ratios that had slipped out moments before. Joe filed away these inconsistencies, wondering where a clumsy waitress had learned precision. Mechanical vocabulary. The monthly visits from traveling pharmaceutical salespeople to Dr. Williams' clinic created opportunities for Elena to demonstrate medical knowledge she supposedly didn't possess. When a salesman collapsed from heat exhaustion outside the diner, Elena immediately checked his pulse points and monitored his breathing pattern with the systematic approach of someone trained in combat medicine. She'd begun establishing an airway when the man revived, allowing her to cover her professional assessment by claiming she'd learned first aid from watching TV shows. Elena's spatial awareness manifested in ways that contradicted her clumsy reputation, particularly when navigating crowded spaces during community events. While other people bumped into each other and struggled through dense crowds, Elena moved through packed rooms like water flowing around obstacles, never colliding with anyone despite appearing to stumble constantly. Festival organizer Mary Thompson noticed that Elena somehow always ended up in optimal positions for crowd control, though she seemed to arrive there entirely by accident. The local library's computer system crashed during a busy Saturday, leaving librarian Dorothy Hendricks frantically trying to restore lost data while a line of frustrated patrons waited. Elena, who claimed to barely understand technology, quietly suggested a series of troubleshooting steps that resolved the problem within minutes. "My neighbor showed me that trick once," Elena explained when Dorothy asked how she'd known the complex recovery procedure. But Dorothy later discovered that no such neighbor existed in Elena's building. Elena's knowledge of regional geography extended far beyond tourist information, encompassing tactical considerations that civilian hikers never considered. When search and rescue teams needed volunteers for a missing hiker operation, Elena provided detailed information about hidden cave systems, alternative approach routes, and potential hazards that weren't marked on official trail maps. "I like to explore during my time off," she explained to the grateful rescue coordinator, though her descriptions included elevation calculations and sightline analyses that suggested military reconnaissance training. The town's amateur radio club occasionally set up emergency communication tests, and Elena would linger nearby during their operations, listening to radio protocols with obvious familiarity. When operator Bill Stevens had trouble with antenna positioning, Elena casually suggested adjustments that dramatically improved signal strength. "Lucky guess," she said when Bill thanked her. But her recommendations demonstrated understanding of radio wave propagation theory that contradicted her supposed lack of technical knowledge. During the annual blood drive at the community center, Elena's behavior around medical equipment revealed familiarity that puzzled the visiting nurse staff. She automatically positioned herself to assist with equipment setup, demonstrating knowledge of sterile procedures and supply organization that seemed inconsistent with her civilian background. When questioned about her medical experience, Elena claimed she donated blood many times before, though her competence suggested professional healthcare training rather than simple donor experience. Tuesday morning started like any other day at Murphy's Diner until Deputy Mike Chen burst through the front door, his radio crackling with urgent dispatch calls and his face pale with the kind of tension that meant serious trouble. Elena was wiping down the counter when Mike rushed to the coffee pot, his hands shaking slightly as he poured a cup he'd barely have time to drink. "What's happening?" Frank Murphy asked, noting the unusual urgency in the deputy's movements. Mike hesitated, glancing around the diner at the handful of early customers before lowering his voice. "Armed situation at the elementary school. Some guy with a rifle barricaded himself in the principal's office, and he's got 3 hostages, including Mrs. Davidson and 2 first-grade teachers." The coffee cup slipped from Elena's suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering against the floor as her carefully maintained facade cracked for just an instant. She immediately bent to clean up the mess, but Mike had caught the look of sharp, focused concern that replaced her usual scattered expression. "How many children?" Elena asked quietly, her voice carrying an intensity that made Mike look at her more carefully than he ever had before. "Building's been evacuated," Mike replied, studying Elena's reaction. "But the guy's positioned at a window with clear sight lines to the playground where kids are still gathering for early arrival. State police are en route, but it's going to be at least 40 minutes before they get here with a tactical team." Principal Janet Davidson was Mayor Thomas Davidson's wife, a beloved educator who taught 3 generations of Millbrook Falls children. The gunman, later identified as Russell Crawford, was a troubled local man who'd lost his job at the lumber mill and blamed the school system for his son's learning disabilities. Crawford had chosen his position with disturbing tactical awareness, positioning himself at the second floor, principal's office window that commanded views of both the playground and the main street approach routes. Early reports suggested he was armed with a hunting rifle and had made demands about reversing his son's special education placement, but his increasingly erratic behavior indicated a man losing touch with reality. Chief Martinez arrived at the scene within minutes, quickly establishing a perimeter and coordinating with state authorities. But the situation deteriorated rapidly when Crawford began firing warning shots toward the playground area. The remaining children and parents waiting for school to start scattered in panic, some taking cover behind cars in the parking lot, while others fled toward Main Street. Crawford's elevated position and the wide-open spaces around the school created a nearly impossible tactical problem for local law enforcement, who lacked the training and equipment for precision operations. The state police SWAT commander, Captain Liza Torres, coordinated the response from her mobile command unit an hour outside Millbrook Falls, but her assessment of the situation was grimly realistic. "This guy picked his spot well," Torres told Chief Martinez over the radio. "Second floor window, multiple angles of fire, hostages positioned where any aggressive entry could get them killed. We need someone who can take a precision shot from an extreme angle, probably through glass, without risking civilian casualties. My best marksman is with another unit 3 hours away, and every minute we wait, this situation gets more volatile." Crawford's demands made no logical sense, rambling between complaints about his son's teachers, threats against school board members, and accusations that the education system had deliberately sabotaged his family. The hostage negotiator connected by phone reported that Crawford seemed to be experiencing some kind of psychological break, alternating between moments of clarity and periods where he spoke to people who weren't there. "He's armed with what appears to be a high-powered hunting rifle with a scope," the negotiator reported. "The hostages are terrified, and I don't think he's going to stay rational much longer." The tactical challenge was made worse by the school's architecture and surrounding terrain. The principal's office window faced east toward the playground, but it was elevated 45 feet above ground level with clear sight lines, extending 300 yards in multiple directions. Any approaching officers would be visible long before they could get close enough for standard police weapons to be effective. The building's brick construction meant that walls would stop most ammunition, but Crawford's position at the window made him effectively unreachable by conventional law enforcement tactics. Dr. Patricia Williams arrived to coordinate medical response, setting up a triage station at the community center 2 blocks away from the school. She'd treated Crawford's son for various minor injuries over the years and knew the family's history of mental health struggles and financial problems. "Russell's been under tremendous stress," she told Chief Martinez. "Lost his job 6 months ago, going through a messy divorce, and he's been drinking heavily. His son's special needs placement was probably the last straw, but this isn't really about education policies. This is a man who feels like he's lost control of everything in his life." The mayor, Thomas Davidson, arrived despite orders to stay away, his face drawn with fear for his wife Janet, who remained trapped with the 2 young teachers in the principal's office. "What are our options?" Davidson demanded, barely maintaining his composure. "We can't just wait for state police while that maniac holds my wife hostage. There has to be something we can do." Chief Martinez explained the tactical problems with painful honesty. Local officers weren't trained for this type of precision operation. The angles were wrong for any safe approach, and Crawford's position gave him overwhelming advantages. As the morning progressed, Crawford's behavior became increasingly unpredictable. He fired several more shots, one of which shattered a car windshield in the school parking lot, sending glass fragments across an area where children had been playing. Just minutes before, The psychological pressure was affecting the hostages as well, with the phone negotiator reporting that the teachers were becoming hysterical and Mrs. Davidson was trying to keep everyone calm while dealing with her own terror. The state police tactical team was still 20 minutes away when Crawford's demands escalated to threats of imminent violence. He says he's going to start shooting people in 5 minutes if we don't bring the school board to apologize publicly, the negotiator reported with growing desperation. I don't think he's bluffing anymore. This man is having a complete breakdown, and he's got the firepower to kill everyone in that room before we can reach him. Captain Torres reviewed the tactical options one more time, all of which carried unacceptable risks. A frontal assault would likely result in hostage deaths. Waiting for specialized equipment meant Crawford might follow through on his threats. Attempts to gas or smoke the building could cause panic that would trigger more violence. We need someone who can make an impossible shot from an extreme angle, Torres concluded grimly. 300 yards, elevated target, moving hostages, glass barriers, and crosswinds. Even our best marksmen would consider this a low-percentage operation. The desperation in Chief Martinez's voice carried clearly over the radio as he surveyed the impossible situation. Parents gathered behind the police perimeter, some crying, others demanding action that nobody knew how to provide safely. The morning sun was creating glare problems that would affect any sniper's accuracy, and weather reports indicated increasing wind conditions that would make long-distance shooting even more challenging. Deputy Mike Chen stood behind the police barricade, watching the impossible situation unfold while his mind raced through every possible solution they'd already exhausted. The state police SWAT team was still 15 minutes out. Crawford was becoming more unstable by the minute, and Chief Martinez was running out of options that didn't end with dead hostages. Mike's training had covered basic firearm situations, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for a precision shooting scenario where failure meant watching innocent people die. As Mike scanned the crowd of anxious parents and worried townspeople gathered behind the yellow tape, his eyes fell on Elena Vasquez standing near the back of the group, her uniform still stained with coffee from the broken cup at the diner. She was watching the school building with an intensity that seemed different from the helpless fear on everyone else's faces. There was something calculating in her expression, a focused assessment that reminded Mike of something he couldn't quite place. Then the memory hit him like a physical blow. 3 years ago, during the traffic stop that had nearly cost him his life, Elena had thrown her car keys with impossible precision to disable the armed suspect. At the time, Mike had dismissed it as incredible luck, but now he found himself remembering details he'd forgotten. The way Elena had moved, the calculated arc of her throw, the absolute confidence in her motion. Most people would have panicked or fumbled, but Elena had acted with the kind of split-second precision that suggested extensive training. Mike's partner, Deputy Sarah Lopez, noticed his sudden change in expression. "What are you thinking, Mike?" she asked, following his gaze toward Elena. "You look like you just figured something out." Mike hesitated, knowing how crazy his theory would sound to anyone who knew Elena only as the town's most accident-prone waitress. "That woman over there," he said quietly, pointing toward Elena. "She's not what she appears to be." Captain Torres' voice crackled over the radio with increasing desperation. "We're looking at a 300-yard shot through glass with hostages, in close proximity to the target. Wind conditions are getting worse, and Crawford just fired another warning shot toward the playground area. My marksman is still 40 minutes away, and I don't think we have 40 minutes before this guy starts killing people." The pieces clicked together in Mike's mind with sudden clarity. Elena's uncanny awareness of her surroundings, her ability to predict exactly when people would enter the diner, her knowledge of weather patterns that exceeded simple civilian observation. The way she moved when she thought nobody was watching, with a silence and precision that contradicted everything about her clumsy public persona. Her reaction to sudden loud noises, the automatic threat assessment that she quickly covered with exaggerated startle responses. Chief Martinez was conferring with Captain Torres when Mike approached, his heart pounding with the magnitude of what he was about to suggest. "Chief, I know this sounds insane, but I think there might be someone here who could help." Martinez looked at Mike with the expression of a man grasping at straws. "What do you mean, someone here? We don't have anyone with that kind of specialized training." Mike took a deep breath, knowing he was about to sound completely crazy to everyone within earshot. "Elena Vasquez, the waitress from Murphy's Diner. I think she's former military, possibly special forces or sniper school. I've seen things over the years that don't add up with her cover story." Deputy Lopez stared at Mike as if he'd lost his mind. "Elena? You mean Butterfingers Elena? Mike, that woman can't carry a coffee pot without dropping it. You want to give her a precision rifle?" Chief Martinez was about to dismiss Mike's suggestion when Captain Torres' voice came over the radio again, more urgent than before. "Crawford just put the barrel of his rifle against one of the hostages' heads. We're out of time for conventional solutions. Do you have any local hunters or military veterans who might have long-range shooting experience?" Martinez looked at Mike with new attention. "Explain what you mean about Elena and make it fast." Mike began recounting the incidents he'd witnessed over the years, painting a picture of someone whose carefully constructed incompetence had fooled an entire town. The traffic stop incident, Elena's uncanny spatial awareness, her knowledge of subjects far beyond her supposed experience. "I know it sounds impossible," Mike concluded, "but what if she's been hiding in plain sight? What if the clumsiness is all an act?" Dr. Patricia Williams, who had been listening from the medical station, joined the conversation with her own observations. "I've noticed inconsistencies in her behavior patterns for months," Patricia admitted. "Her reflexes, her movement patterns, her knowledge of medical procedures. I've suspected she had some kind of professional background that she wasn't sharing." Captain Torres had been monitoring the conversation through Chief Martinez's open radio channel. "I don't care if you're talking about a circus clown," Torres said grimly. "If there's any possibility that someone there has precision shooting capabilities, we need to explore it immediately. Crawford just threatened to start executing hostages in the next few minutes." Chief Martinez looked across the crowd toward Elena, who was still studying the school building with that same intense focus. "This is either the stupidest idea I've ever heard or the only chance we've got left," Martinez muttered. He keyed his radio. "Captain Torres, we're going to approach a potential local asset. Give us 3 minutes to assess the situation." As the group of officers approached Elena, she seemed to sense them coming before they got within speaking distance. Her posture shifted subtly, the scattered nervousness replaced by alert readiness. When Chief Martinez called her name, Elena turned with eyes that held none of the confused uncertainty that characterized her interactions at the diner. "Elena," Chief Martinez began carefully, "we need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you have any military or law enforcement background that might be relevant to our current situation?" Elena's expression didn't change, but Mike noticed that she automatically positioned herself with clear sight. Lines to multiple exits, a tactical awareness that civilian wouldn't possess. Elena looked toward the school building, then back at the assembled officers, her mind clearly calculating something far more complex than coffee orders or restaurant schedules. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" she said quietly, her voice carrying a steady authority that none of them had heard before. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. The scattered, apologetic waitress was gone, replaced by someone who spoke with the measured confidence of professional competence. "Captain," Torres' voice came through Martinez's radio with barely controlled urgency. "Crawford's countdown just hit 2 minutes. Whatever you're discussing, make it happen now, or we're going to have dead civilians on our hands." Elena heard the transmission clearly and nodded once, a sharp military acknowledgement. That confirmed everything Mike had suspected. "I'll need to assess the tactical situation," Elena said, already moving toward a better vantage point. "What's your current intelligence on the target's position, weapon type, and hostage locations?" The professional terminology flowed naturally from her lips, leaving no doubt that whatever her background, it involved exactly the kind of specialized training they desperately needed. Elena's entire physical presence altered the moment Chief Martinez finished his question. Her shoulders straightened from the perpetual slouch she maintained at the diner. Her uncertain shuffle disappeared, and her eyes took on the sharp, calculating focus of someone assessing a tactical situation. The scattered, apologetic waitress, who apologized for every minor accident, vanished completely, replaced by a professional who spoke in crisp, economical sentences that wasted no words. "I need current intelligence on the shooter's exact position, weapon specifications, and precise hostage locations," Elena said, her voice carrying the authoritative tone of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions under pressure. Deputy Lopez stared in shock at the transformation, barely recognizing the woman who had served her coffee that morning while stumbling over her own feet. This Elena moved with purposeful precision, her hands steady and her gaze fixed on the tactical problem rather than scattered in multiple directions. Dr. Patricia Williams watched the metamorphosis with professional fascination, finally understanding the inconsistency she'd observed for years. Elena's medical knowledge, her spatial awareness, her uncanny ability to predict weather patterns and assess mechanical problems, all the pieces fell into place as they witnessed someone dropping a carefully maintained cover identity. "My God," Patricia whispered to Deputy Chen. "She's been performing incompetence for 3 years straight." Elena approached the police barricade with movements that demonstrated tactical training, automatically positioning herself to use available cover while maintaining sightlines to the target building. She studied the school's architecture with the systematic approach of someone trained in urban warfare, her eyes cataloging windows, roof lines, potential approach routes, and firing positions. The nervous fidgeting that characterized her restaurant work disappeared entirely, replaced by the controlled stillness of a professional sniper evaluating a complex shot. Chief Martinez handed Elena a pair of binoculars, watching her face as she studied Crawford's position in the principal's office window. Elena's assessment was methodical and thorough, taking into account factors that the local officers hadn't even considered. "Target is approximately 45 feet elevation, 320 yards from this position," Elena reported, with the clinical precision of someone who had made similar calculations hundreds of times. "Glass barrier appears to be standard institutional thickness. Wind conditions are variable but manageable. Lighting creates some glare issues, but within acceptable parameters." The transformation extended beyond Elena's physical bearing to her speech patterns and technical vocabulary. Gone were the hesitant phrases and apologetic explanations that punctuated her conversations at Murphy's Diner. Instead, she spoke with the confident terminology of military operations, using words like target acquisition, ballistic compensation, and threat assessment with natural familiarity. Captain Torres, monitoring the conversation through Chief Martinez's open radio, immediately recognized the language of professional marksmanship training. Elena's hands, which had appeared clumsy and uncertain while carrying coffee pots and serving plates, now moved with absolute confidence as she examined the available equipment. When offered a department-issued rifle, she inspected it with the efficient thoroughness of someone evaluating critical equipment, checking the scope calibration, testing the trigger pull, and assessing the weapon's condition with motions that demonstrated extensive firearms expertise. The crowd of concerned parents and townspeople began to notice the change in Elena's demeanor, their expressions shifting from fear to confusion as they witnessed the town's most accident-prone resident discussing tactical options with law enforcement. Madison Cooper, The teenager who had filmed Elena's clumsy mishaps for social media stared in disbelief at the composed, professional figure conferring with police officers about precision shooting techniques. Elena's assessment of the tactical situation revealed knowledge that far exceeded civilian hunting experience or basic firearms training. She calculated wind speed by observing flag movement and vegetation patterns, estimated range using landmarks and architectural features, and identified potential complications, including glass refraction, target movement patterns, and backdrop considerations that could affect civilian safety. The shot is feasible, Elena concluded, but it requires positioning from the water tower to achieve proper angle and minimize collateral damage risk. Frank Murphy arrived at the scene after hearing radio reports about the school crisis, searching the crowd for his employees to ensure their safety. When he spotted Elena deep in tactical discussions with Chief Martinez, Frank's expression showed complete bewilderment. The woman he'd watched drop countless plates and spill endless cups of coffee was calmly explaining ballistic trajectories and discussing equipment requirements with the professional competence of a military specialist. Elena's physical conditioning became apparent as she prepared for the operation, moving with the fluid efficiency of someone maintaining peak fitness despite years of hiding behind a sedentary civilian role. Her breathing remained controlled, her movements economical, and her mental focus absolute as she prepared for a shot that would test the limits of even expert marksmanship. The nervous energy that seemed to plague her restaurant work was nowhere to be seen, replaced by the centered calm of professional preparation. The water tower Elena had identified as the optimal shooting position required a climb of 60 feet up a maintenance ladder, carrying precision equipment while maintaining operational readiness upon arrival. Without hesitation, Elena shouldered the rifle and began ascending with smooth, practiced motions that demonstrated familiarity with tactical movement under equipment load. Deputy Chen watched the climb with amazement, realizing that Elena's supposed clumsiness had masked physical capabilities that most people couldn't match. Captain Torres coordinated directly with Elena through Chief Martinez's radio, their conversation flowing in the technical shorthand of professionals discussing complex operations. Wind speed currently 8 to 12 knots from northwest. Temperature 72 degrees, humidity 45%, Elena reported from her elevated position. Target acquisition confirmed. Hostage positions identified. Backdrop is clear. Request final authorization for engagement. Elena's scope work demonstrated expertise that came only from extensive training and operational experience. She made minute adjustments for environmental factors, calculated holdover for the elevated angle, and compensated for glass barrier characteristics with the systematic thoroughness of someone who had made similar shots under combat conditions. Her breathing pattern shifted to the controlled rhythm used by precision shooters to minimize movement during target engagement. The assembled crowd watched in stunned silence as Elena settled into her final shooting position, the nervous, accident-prone waitress completely replaced by a figure of absolute professional competence. Mayor Davidson, whose wife remained trapped with the other hostages, found himself placing his trust in the woman he'd always dismissed as harmless and incompetent. "She knows what she's doing," he said quietly, more to reassure himself than to inform others. Elena's final equipment check revealed the meticulous attention to detail that characterized elite marksmen, verifying scope settings, ammunition condition, and weapon stability with motion so practiced they seemed automatic. Her transformation from small-town waitress to precision specialist was complete, witnessed by an entire community that had never suspected the true capabilities of the woman they called Butterfingers. Through the rifle scope, Elena could see Crawford's erratic movements and the terrified faces of the hostages pressed against the office window. Her professional assessment confirmed what everyone feared. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and conventional law enforcement options had been exhausted. The shot she was preparing to take would test every aspect of her training and experience with lives hanging in the balance and no margin for error. Elena's breathing settled into the controlled rhythm she had learned during countless hours on military ranges, each exhale timed to the natural pause between heartbeats that provided the steadiest platform for precision shooting. From her position, atop the water tower, 60 feet above the ground, she had a clear line of sight to Crawford's position in the principal's office window. The elevated angle eliminated most of the cover advantages that had made the situation impossible for conventional law enforcement tactics. Through the rifle scope, Elena could see Crawford pacing erratically behind the principal's desk, his hunting rifle sweeping unpredictably between the three hostages huddled against the far wall. Principal Janet Davidson sat protectively in front of the two young teachers, her face pale but determined as she tried to keep everyone calm despite her own terror. Crawford's movements were becoming increasingly agitated, his grip on reality clearly slipping as he alternated between shouting at the hostages and carrying on conversations with people who existed only in his fractured mind. Elena's scope crosshairs tracked Crawford's movements with mechanical precision, her muscle memory automatically calculating the complex variables that would determine success or catastrophic failure. Wind speed at elevation was different from ground level, requiring constant adjustment based on flag movement from multiple buildings. The morning sun created glare patterns on the school's windows that could deflect her sight picture at the critical moment. The institutional glass of the principal's office window would alter the bullet's trajectory, though Elena's experience with similar barriers allowed her to compensate for the expected deviation. Captain Torres' voice crackled through Chief Martinez's radio with urgent updates from the hostage negotiator. Crawford just stopped responding to phone contact. Last coherent statement was that he was going to end this whole mess in the next minute. Behavioral analysis suggests we're looking at a murder-suicide scenario if immediate action isn't taken. Elena acknowledged the transmission with a single, keyed click, maintaining radio silence to preserve her concentration while making final adjustments to scope settings. The technical complexity of the shot would have challenged even the most experienced military marksman. 320 yards might seem manageable for precision rifles, but the elevated angle complicated ballistic calculations, requiring Elena to adjust for the bullet's different flight path through varying air density. The glass barrier introduced unpredictable variables, thickness variations, stress patterns, and refraction angles that could send her bullet inches off target in any direction. Most critically, Crawford's erratic movement pattern meant Elena would have less than a 2-second window when the shot could be taken without risking the hostages' lives. Elena's hands moved with practiced efficiency as she made minute adjustments to the rifle's position, using the water tower's metal framework as a stable shooting platform. Her body settled into the classical prone position that provided maximum stability, with the rifle's weight distributed across multiple contact points to minimize movement. Years of training had taught her to become part of the weapon system, eliminating human variables that could introduce error at the moment of trigger break. Through the scope, Elena watched Crawford raise his rifle toward Principal Davidson's head while continuing his rambling monologue about educational conspiracies and family betrayals. The hostages' terror was visible even at distance, their faces frozen in the desperate hope that somehow rescue would arrive before Crawford's psychological deterioration reached its final stage. Elena's crosshairs settled on Crawford's center mass, the preferred target for precision shooters when headshots carried too much risk of missing completely. The wind conditions shifted suddenly as a gust moved through the valley, requiring Elena to adjust her point of aim to compensate for lateral drift during the bullet's flight time. Her breathing pattern remained absolutely controlled, each inhalation and exhalation timed to minimize movement of the rifle system. The trigger came back with smooth, steady pressure applied directly rearward, exactly as Elena had been trained during thousands of hours of practice that had become automatic reflex. Elena's shot broke precisely as Crawford turned toward the window, his rifle barrel swinging away from the hostages for a crucial instant that provided the safest engagement opportunity. The bullet traveled the distance to the target in less than half a second, punching through the office window with a sharp crack that shattered glass across the interior floor. Crawford dropped immediately, his weapon clattering harmlessly away. From the hostages, who remained pressed against the wall in shocked silence, the immediate aftermath of the shot created a moment of absolute stillness across the entire scene. Crawford's body lay motionless behind the principal's desk, while the three hostages remained frozen against the wall, not yet comprehending that their ordeal had ended. Elena maintained her shooting position for several seconds, scope-trained on the office window to assess the results and identify any continuing threats. Only when she confirmed that Crawford was no longer moving did she safe her weapon and begin the descent from the water tower. Chief Martinez's radio exploded with coordinated activity as officers moved to secure the scene and extract the hostages. From the principal's office, "Target is down. Repeat, target is down," Captain Torres reported to State Police Headquarters. "Hostages appear unharmed. Situation is stabilized. Outstanding marksmanship by local asset resolved the crisis without civilian casualties." The professional admiration in Torres' voice was unmistakable as she coordinated the tactical team's entry into the school building. Elena's descent from the water tower was accomplished with the same controlled efficiency that had characterized her ascent, weapon properly secured and her movements deliberate, despite the adrenaline that comes with successful completion of a high-stakes operation. The crowd of townspeople watched in stunned silence as the woman they had known as Butterfingers demonstrated capabilities that challenged everything they thought they understood about human potential hidden in plain sight. Dr. Patricia Williams was among the first to reach Elena as she touched ground, medical training compelling her to assess for signs of shock or stress reaction following the precision shooting. Instead, she found Elena displaying the controlled calm of someone accustomed to high-pressure operations, her vital signs stable, and her mental state focused on post-operation procedures rather than emotional processing of what had just occurred. Immediate response from law enforcement was a mixture of professional respect and personal bewilderment as officers who had known Elena for years tried to reconcile the expert marksman with their previous assumptions about her capabilities. Deputy Mike Chen approached with expressions of gratitude mixed with curiosity about Elena's background, his earlier suspicions now confirmed in the most dramatic way possible. Frank Murphy pushed through the crowd, his face showing complete disbelief at witnessing his accident-prone employee execute a precision shot that had saved 3 lives under conditions that would have challenged any professional sniper. "Elena," he said quietly, "I think we need to have a conversation about your previous work experience." Elena's response was characteristically direct. "Some jobs require different skills than others. Frank, I'm still the same person who showed up for every shift." The rescue of the hostages proceeded smoothly once Crawford had been neutralized, with Principal Davidson and the 2 teachers extracted from the office without additional trauma. Medical evaluation confirmed that all 3 were physically unharmed, though they would require counseling to process the psychological impact of their terrifying ordeal. Principal Davidson's first question, upon reaching safety, was about the identity of the marksman who had saved their lives. Captain Torres made a point of personally thanking Elena for her intervention, one professional recognizing another despite the unusual circumstances of their collaboration. "That was textbook precision work under extremely difficult conditions," Torres said with genuine admiration. "Whatever your background, you just demonstrated capabilities that most of our specialists would respect." Elena accepted the recognition with the modest professionalism that characterized elite operators, deflecting praise while acknowledging the successful outcome. News of Elena's impossible shot spread through Millbrook Falls faster than wildfire, transforming her from the town's most pitied resident into its most respected hero within hours of Crawford's neutralization. By evening, every conversation in every household centered on the same impossible reality. Butterfingers Elena, the woman who couldn't carry a coffee pot without incident, had just executed a precision shot that seasoned law enforcement officers called miraculous. The cognitive dissonance left an entire community struggling to reconcile years of observed clumsiness with demonstrated expertise that bordered on legendary. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying this story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Frank Murphy closed the diner early that evening, not because of lack of customers, but because he couldn't concentrate on normal operations while processing the revelation about his employee. Elena had returned to work immediately after the incident, insisting that the dinner rush still needed coverage despite Chief Martinez's suggestion that she take time off. "People still need to eat," Elena had said simply, tying her apron with the same efficient motion she'd always used. Though Frank noticed her hands no longer trembled when handling delicate items, the transformation in how customers interacted with Elena was immediately apparent when the diner reopened the next morning. Harold Fletcher, the businessman who had spent years protecting his laptop from Elena's supposed clumsiness, now stood when she approached his table, offering respectful greetings instead of patronizing warnings about accidents. "Morning, Elena," he said with genuine warmth, making no move to shield his papers. "Coffee would be great, thank you." Elena poured his coffee with steady hands, and Fletcher noticed that not a single drop spilled despite her carrying the same pot that had caused countless accidents before. Dr. Patricia Williams made a special trip to the diner that first morning, driven by professional curiosity about how Elena was processing the dramatic shift in her public identity. Instead of the scattered, apologetic waitress she expected, Patricia found Elena moving through her duties with quiet confidence, no longer performing the elaborate clumsiness that had characterized her work for 3 years. "How are you feeling?" "About yesterday?" Patricia asked gently. Elena's response was characteristically direct. "I did what needed to be done. Today I'm doing what needs to be done today." The morning regulars arrived with a mixture of awe and embarrassment, suddenly conscious of how they'd treated Elena during her years of supposed incompetence. Old Pete Kowalski brought his usual gruff demeanor, but his tone carried new respect when he ordered his black coffee and wheat toast. "Hell of a thing you did yesterday," Pete said quietly, his voice gruff with emotion. "Thank you." Elena nodded acknowledgement while pouring his coffee, her movements precise and controlled, making Pete realize that the accidents he'd witnessed had been deliberate performances. Sarah Chun arrived for her shift, visibly shaken by the cognitive adjustment required to understand Elena's true nature. For 3 years, Sarah had made excuses for Elena's clumsiness to frustrated customers, defended her incompetence to management, and felt genuinely sorry for someone she'd perceived as fundamentally disadvantaged. "I don't understand," Sarah said during their morning shift change. "Were you pretending to be clumsy this whole time?" Elena's answer revealed the depth of her deception. "Some people need to be invisible, Sarah. Being clumsy made me forgettable." The afternoon brought a steady stream of visitors who came not for food, but to see Elena with their own eyes, as if witnessing her normal restaurant duties would somehow explain the miraculous transformation they'd witnessed. Mayor Thomas Davidson arrived with his wife Janet, the principal Elena had helped rescue, both of them struggling to find adequate words for gratitude that seemed beyond normal expression. "You saved my life," Janet said simply, tears in her eyes as she watched Elena calmly wipe down tables with hands that had demonstrated impossible precision. Just 24 hours earlier, Elena's interaction with the community's children revealed perhaps the most significant change in her social status. Jenny Patterson, the teenage part-timer who had filmed Elena's accidents for social media entertainment, now approached her with a mixture of respect and curiosity that replaced her previous condescending amusement. "I deleted all those videos," Jenny said quietly during a break in the dinner rush. "I'm really sorry for making fun of you." Elena's response showed characteristic forgiveness. "You saw what I wanted you to see, Jenny. No apology necessary." The evening shift brought Chief Martinez and several deputies, not for official business but for personal conversation with someone they now recognized as a peer in law enforcement capabilities. "We'd like to know more about your background," Martinez said diplomatically, "but I understand if that's not something you want to discuss." Elena appreciated his respect for operational security, responding with professional courtesy. "Some stories can't be told, Chief, but I'm available if you need consultation on tactical matters." Captain Torres made a special trip from State Police Headquarters, bringing official recognition and informal job offers that Elena politely declined. "You could write your own ticket with any law enforcement agency in the state," Torres said, over coffee at Elena's section. "What you did yesterday was the kind of marksmanship that builds careers." Elena's refusal was polite but firm. "I serve this community better as Elena the waitress than as Elena the sniper. Some capabilities are most valuable when they remain hidden." The town's perception of Elena's living situation changed overnight, as people realized that her modest lifestyle above the hardware store wasn't evidence of limited resources, but deliberate choice to maintain a low profile. Mrs. Rose Rossetti, her landlady, found herself treating Elena with new deference, offering renovations and improvements that Elena had never requested. "You could afford much better accommodations," Rose suggested. Elena's response reflected her commitment to her chosen identity. "This apartment meets my needs perfectly, Mrs. Rossetti. I prefer simple living." Elena's knowledge and capabilities became resources that community members began consulting for various challenges beyond law enforcement. Joe Reynolds from the sporting goods store sought her advice on inventory decisions, recognizing expertise that his customers would value. "What would you recommend for long-range hunting rifles?" Joe asked, finally acknowledging Elena's obvious familiarity with precision equipment. Elena's recommendations were technical and thorough, demonstrating knowledge that transformed Joe's respect for her overnight. The volunteer fire department approached Elena about training consultation, with Captain Gary Matthews recognizing tactical capabilities that could benefit emergency response operations. "We could use someone with your situational awareness skills," Gary suggested during the casual conversation. Elena agreed to provide informal advice while maintaining her civilian status, offering expertise without official entanglement that might compromise her carefully maintained identity. Elena's weekend activities expanded to include informal self-defense and situational awareness training for community members who requested instruction. Word spread quietly about Elena's willingness to teach practical skills, drawing participants who ranged from concerned parents to small business owners interested in security awareness. Elena conducted these sessions with professional competence, while maintaining her preference for staying outside official recognition or certification programs. The local book club, previously nervous about Elena's presence around breakable items, now sought her perspective on military memoirs and tactical literature they'd never understood before. Dorothy Hendricks found Elena's insights invaluable for book discussions, though Elena remained characteristically modest about her expertise. "Everyone brings different experiences to literature," Elena would say when praised for her analytical contributions. Elena's relationship with Murphy's diner evolved into something resembling a partnership, with Frank recognizing that his employee possessed capabilities that extended far beyond food service. "You're overqualified for this job," Frank observed during a quiet evening conversation. Elena's response reflected her genuine satisfaction with her chosen role. "I'm qualified for many jobs, Frank. This is the one I choose to do." The transformation in Elena's daily interactions was subtle but pervasive, with community members treating her with respect that acknowledged hidden depths while accepting her continued preference for serving coffee and cleaning tables. She remained Elena the waitress, but Elena the waitress who had saved 3 lives with an impossible shot when her community needed her most. 6 months after the school crisis, Elena Vasquez continued arriving at Murphy's Diner every morning at 5:30, 30 minutes before opening, just as she had for 3 years. The difference now was that customers no longer saw her early arrival as the desperate punctuality of someone afraid of losing a job she was lucky to have. Instead, they recognized the disciplined professionalism of someone who chose excellence in everything she undertook, whether serving coffee or saving lives with impossible precision shots. Elena's daily routines remained unchanged by her newfound recognition, though the community's understanding of those routines had transformed completely. When she methodically cleaned tables and organized the dining room before customers arrived, people now saw the systematic thoroughness of someone trained to prepare for any scenario. Her habit of standing near windows while wiping counters was no longer viewed as absent-minded distraction, but as the situational awareness of someone who automatically monitored her environment for potential threats or opportunities to help. Morning coffee conversations at Murphy's Diner had evolved to include Elena as a respected participant rather than a pitied observer. When old-timers discussed local history, hunting experiences, or community challenges, they naturally turned to Elena for insights that drew from depths of experience none of them fully understood, but all of them respected. Elena shared her perspectives sparingly, with the measured wisdom of someone who had seen more of the world than most people could imagine, yet chose to invest her knowledge in the quiet service of a small mountain community. Principal Janet Davidson made weekly visits to the diner not just for coffee, but to spend time with the woman who had saved her life. Their conversations revealed Elena's continuing commitment to protecting others, whether through precision marksmanship when crises demanded it, or through the steady reliability of showing up for work when ordinary life required it. "You chose to stay here," Janet observed during one of their talks. "With your abilities, you could work anywhere, do anything." Elena's response reflected her genuine contentment with her chosen path. "Home is where you can serve people who matter to you." "Janet, this community matters to me." The school board, led by Janet's recommendations, quietly established a crisis response protocol that included Elena as an unofficial consultant, recognizing that expertise of her caliber deserved acknowledgement even if her full background remained classified. Elena accepted the advisory role with characteristic professionalism, providing tactical insights while maintaining her civilian status and her daily work at the diner. Her recommendations improved emergency procedures not just for the school, but for the entire town's approach to crisis management. Elena's influence extended beyond crisis planning into everyday community improvement projects that drew from her unique combination of tactical awareness and genuine care for her neighbors. When the town council discussed traffic safety improvements, Elena's suggestions incorporated pedestrian protection strategies that reflected both military understanding of movement patterns and intimate knowledge of how local families used public spaces. Her insights transformed routine municipal decisions into comprehensive safety improvements that protected everyone more effectively. The monthly community gatherings that had once excluded Elena from meaningful participation now actively sought her perspective on challenges ranging from emergency preparedness to youth development programs. Elena's contributions were always practical and focused on outcomes rather than recognition, offering solutions that work because they considered variables that others missed. Parents began consulting Elena about teaching their children responsibility and situational awareness, recognizing that her approach to personal safety education came from real-world experience with life and death consequences. Dr. Patricia Williams, established informal medical training sessions where Elena taught basic emergency response techniques to community volunteers, sharing knowledge that went far beyond standard first aid certification. Elena's instruction style was patient and thorough, emphasizing prevention and preparation over dramatic intervention, teaching people to recognize problems before they became crises. Her students learned that true emergency preparedness meant developing judgment and awareness rather than just memorizing procedures. Elena's weekend activities expanded to include informal counseling for local veterans struggling with their own transitions to civilian life, providing support that drew from her personal experience with leaving military service and finding meaningful purpose in seemingly ordinary work. She never discussed her own operational history, but her understanding of military culture and transition challenges created safe spaces for conversations that helped other veterans navigate their own paths toward productive civilian lives. The helped other veterans navigate their own paths toward productive civilian lives. Annual Community Appreciation Dinner, held each spring to recognize local heroes and volunteers, faced an unusual challenge when organizers tried to honor Elena for her life-saving intervention at the school. Elena politely but firmly declined recognition, explaining that heroism meant stepping forward when needed, not seeking applause afterward. Instead, she suggested the dinner honor all the first responders, volunteers, and community members who served others without expectation of recognition, redirecting attention toward collective service rather than individual achievement. Elena's philosophy of service influenced how other community members understood their own potential contributions to the collective good. Her example demonstrated that extraordinary capabilities could be channeled through ordinary roles, inspiring others to approach their daily work with greater intentionality and commitment to excellence. Teachers taught with renewed purpose, understanding that their influence might shape students who would face their own moments of crisis. Store owners served customers with enhanced awareness that their interactions contributed to community resilience and mutual support. The revelation of Elena's true capabilities sparked broader conversations throughout Millbrook Falls about assumptions people made regarding their neighbors' backgrounds and potential. Community members began paying closer attention to quiet individuals who might be carrying their own stories of service and expertise, approaching interactions with greater respect for the unknown depths of human experience that surrounded them daily. The town developed a culture of appreciation for competence and character, over visibility and self-promotion. Elena's continuing choice to work as a waitress, despite her demonstrated abilities, became a teaching moment that influenced how the community valued different types of contribution. Parents pointed to Elena as an example when discussing career choices with their children, emphasizing that meaningful work came from serving others effectively rather than pursuing status or recognition. Her contentment with seemingly modest employment challenged assumptions about success and ambition that had limited how people evaluated their own life choices. The story of Elena's transformation spread beyond Millbrook Falls through word of mouth and news reports, inspiring similar discussions in communities across the region about hidden talents and unrecognized capabilities among supposedly ordinary residents. Law enforcement agencies began re-examining their assumptions about civilian resources, while employers reconsidered how they evaluated potential employees who might be carrying extraordinary backgrounds beneath unremarkable appearances. Elena's daily presence at Murphy's Diner served as a constant reminder that heroism lived not in dramatic moments, but in consistent commitment to serving others with excellence and integrity. Customers learned that the woman who poured their coffee with steady hands had once made an impossible shot to save 3 lives, but chose to define herself through her daily service rather than her exceptional capabilities. Her example challenged everyone who knew her story to consider how they might be underestimating the potential within themselves and others around them. The lasting legacy of Elena's revelation extended far beyond the immediate crisis she had resolved, creating permanent changes in how Millbrook Falls understood community, service, and human potential. Children grew up knowing that extraordinary capabilities might be hidden within anyone, encouraging them to treat all people with respect and to develop their own talents in service of others. Adults approached their neighbors with greater curiosity about hidden strengths and untold stories that might emerge when circumstances demanded extraordinary responses. Elena Vasquez continued serving coffee, cleaning tables, and arriving early for every shift. But her community now understood that she represented something profound about human nature and potential that surrounded them daily. In coffee shops and diners, in small offices and quiet neighborhoods, in every community where people gathered and worked and lived together, there were individuals carrying capabilities and experiences that could change everything when the moment demanded courage and competence. Look closely at the quiet ones around you. The person taking your order, fixing your car, teaching your children, or cleaning your office might be carrying skills and stories that could save your life when everything goes wrong. True heroism doesn't announce itself with uniforms or titles. It shows up when needed, performs with excellence, and returns quietly to the ordinary work of serving others with dignity and care. Elena's story reminds us that the most important question isn't who looks like a hero, but who will step forward when heroes are desperately needed. 2 years after the school crisis, Elena's influence had quietly transformed Millbrook Falls into something unprecedented. A small mountain community where ordinary citizens possessed extraordinary awareness and preparedness skills. The change hadn't happened through formal programs or official announcements, but through Elena's patient teaching and the natural spread of knowledge from people who understood that competence and vigilance were gifts worth sharing with neighbors. They cared about protecting. Elena's informal training sessions had evolved into a network of capable residents who approached daily life with heightened situational awareness and practical emergency skills. Jenny Patterson, the teenager who had once filmed Elena's staged accidents, now worked part-time at the diner while attending community college. But she also served as Elena's assistant instructor for basic self-defense classes held in the community center basement. Jenny's transformation from social media mockery to serious student of personal protection reflected the deeper changes Elena's revelation had sparked throughout the town. The monthly community preparedness meetings, initially established after the school incident, had grown into comprehensive training sessions that covered everything from medical emergency response to basic tactical awareness for civilian situations. Elena led these sessions with the same methodical professionalism she brought to restaurant work, teaching practical skills while emphasizing that preparation and prevention were far more valuable than dramatic intervention. Participants learned to recognize potential problems before they became crises, developing judgment that made heroic responses less necessary. Dr. Patricia Williams had formalized Elena's medical training contributions by establishing the Community First Responder Program that exceeded state requirements for rural emergency preparedness. Elena's instruction went beyond standard first aid, teaching participants to assess and stabilize trauma victims under adverse conditions, while maintaining situational awareness of continuing threats. The program attracted participants from neighboring communities who recognized that Elena's teaching offered capabilities unavailable through conventional civilian emergency training. Elena's influence on local law enforcement had transformed how Chief Martinez approached both routine patrol duties and crisis response planning. Weekly consultation sessions with Elena helped develop response protocols that incorporated military-grade tactical thinking adapted for small-town civilian scenarios. Deputy Mike Chen, who had first recognized Elena's hidden capabilities, now served as the department's unofficial liaison with Elena's training network, creating seamless coordination between professional law enforcement and educated civilian response capabilities. The success of Elena's community Development. Approach attracted attention from regional emergency management agencies, seeking to understand how a town of 3,000 had achieved preparedness levels that rivaled much larger jurisdictions with vastly greater resources. Elena politely declined most requests for formal interviews or program documentation, explaining that effective community preparedness grew from trust and personal relationships, rather than bureaucratic systems that could be replicated through administrative procedures. Captain Torres made quarterly visits to Millbrook Falls, not for official state police business, but to study Elena's methods for developing civilian capabilities that complemented rather than interfered with professional emergency response. Torres had begun implementing similar community engagement strategies in other jurisdictions, though she acknowledged that Elena's unique combination of technical expertise and genuine community investment created results that couldn't be easily duplicated elsewhere. Elena's teaching philosophy emphasized that true preparedness meant developing people who could think independently and adapt to unexpected circumstances, rather than just memorize predetermined responses to anticipated scenarios. Her students learned to assess situations, evaluate options, and make decisions under pressure while maintaining awareness of how their actions affected others around them. This approach created community members who enhanced collective safety through improved individual judgment, rather than just following emergency protocols. The ripple effects of Elena's influence extended into areas far removed from crisis response, improving how community members approached everything from business decisions to family relationships. Parents who attended Elena's situational awareness sessions found themselves better equipped to teach their children about recognizing and avoiding dangerous situations. Business owners discovered that Elena's approach to preparation and prevention improved their operational efficiency and customer service quality. Frank Murphy had gradually transitioned from diner owner to Elena's business partner, recognizing that Murphy's Diner had become an informal community center where people gathered, not just for food, but for the sense of security and competence that Elena's presence provided. Frank's respect for Elena had evolved into genuine appreciation for how her commitment to excellence in small tasks translated into extraordinary capabilities when circumstances demanded them. The diner prospered not just because of good food, but because customers valued the example of integrity and service that Elena demonstrated daily. Elena's weekend activities now included consulting work for regional businesses and organizations seeking to improve their emergency preparedness and risk management capabilities. She approached these projects with the same systematic thoroughness that characterized her restaurant work, identifying vulnerabilities and developing practical solutions that addressed real-world challenges rather than just meeting compliance requirements. Her reputation for discretion and effectiveness had created steady demand for her expertise across a wide geographical area. The annual Community Appreciation Dinner had evolved into a celebration of collective competence and mutual support, recognizing that Elena's greatest contribution wasn't her individual marksmanship but her success in developing community-wide capabilities that made extraordinary individual intervention less necessary. Elena continued to decline personal recognition while actively promoting awareness of how community members supported each other through both daily kindness and emergency preparedness. Elena's story had spread through law enforcement and military networks, inspiring similar discussions about hidden expertise within civilian communities across the country. Her example challenged assumptions about where valuable capabilities might be found, encouraging agencies to recognize and cultivate relationships with residents who possessed relevant backgrounds and skills. Some communities began developing informal consultation networks that connected civilian experts with official emergency response systems. The transformation of Millbrook Falls attracted researchers studying community resilience and social capital, seeking to understand how Elena's presence had catalyzed improvements in collective capability that extended far beyond emergency preparedness. Sociologists documented changes in how residents interacted with each other, noting increased levels of mutual respect, practical cooperation, and shared responsibility for community welfare. Elena's influence had created cultural changes that strengthened social bonds while enhancing individual competence. Elena's relationship with Murphy's Diner continued to exemplify her philosophy that meaningful service happened through consistent excellence in ordinary tasks rather than dramatic gestures in extraordinary moments. Customers appreciated that the woman who served their coffee with steady hands was the same person who had saved 3 lives with an impossible shot, but they valued her more for her daily reliability than for her exceptional capabilities. Elena's contentment with restaurant work while maintaining readiness for crisis response demonstrated that true professionals found satisfaction in serving others, regardless of the specific tasks required, that the children who had grown up watching. Elena's transformation from Butterfingers to community protector carried lessons about human potential that would influence their approach to life long after leaving Millbrook Falls. They learned that competence could be hidden beneath humble appearances, that service was more valuable than recognition, and that ordinary people could possess extraordinary capabilities that emerged when circumstances demanded courage and skill. Elena's continuing presence at Murphy's Diner served as a daily reminder that heroism was defined not by dramatic moments, but by consistent readiness to serve others with excellence, integrity, and competence. Her story had become part of Millbrook Falls' identity, attracting visitors who came not just to see the diner where a former sniper served coffee, but to experience a community where ordinary people approach daily life with extraordinary awareness, preparation, and commitment to mutual protection. That the legacy Elena created reached beyond any single crisis or individual achievement, establishing a model for how communities could develop resilience through the patient cultivation of human potential that existed in unexpected places. Her example demonstrated that the most valuable security came not from external protection, but from internal capability, not from individual heroism, but from collective competence, and not from dramatic intervention, but from the quiet strength that came from people who chose to serve others with excellence every single day. Elena still works at Murphy's Diner today, arriving every morning at 5:30, pouring coffee with steady hands that once made an impossible shot to save 3 lives. She never speaks about her military service, never mentions the classified missions or the lives she saved in distant countries before saving lives in her adopted hometown. The awards and commendations from her previous career remain locked in a storage unit she visits twice a year, not from shame but from a deeper understanding that true service doesn't require public recognition. Last month, a new waitress started at Murphy's Diner, a quiet woman named Maria who seems nervous around customers and drops plates with suspicious frequency. Elena watches Maria with knowing eyes, recognizing the deliberate clumsiness of someone working hard to appear harmless and forgettable. During slow afternoons, Elena teaches Maria the precise coffee pouring techniques she's perfected. Though both women understand they're really discussing much more than restaurant skills, the morning regulars have learned not to ask too many questions about Elena's past, but they've also learned to pay closer attention to the quiet people in their own lives. Old Pete Kowalski now nods respectfully to the shy bank teller who might have stories she's never shared. Dr. Patricia Williams treats every patient as someone who could surprise her with hidden depths and untold capabilities. Elena's greatest victory isn't the impossible shot that saved 3 lives. It's the community she helped create, where people understand that extraordinary capabilities often hide behind ordinary appearances, where neighbors protect each other not through suspicion but through respect, and where the quiet ones are valued for qualities that might emerge when courage is desperately needed. What hidden heroes are walking among us in our own communities? Have you ever underestimated someone who surprised you with their capabilities? Share your stories in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when the moment demands it. Hit that notification bell. You never know when the next impossible story will inspire you to see the people around you with completely new eyes.